teen adult game that we always play. We always want to make sure we win, so it won't make too big a difference who wins. Except for Big James and I, James Lemons and I, we will probably win. But that's all right, little James. And so it's the Lemons Bowl, and so make sure you come at 2 o'clock and have a great time playing some football. Christians talk about being offended a lot, and if you look at Christians, and if you sit down with Christians every now and then, you will notice that they will always talk about this idea of being offended. They're offended by this, they're offended by that. And it's something that they will always kind of deal with. And as Christians, we're offended by a multiplicity of things. We're offended by morality. We're offended by certain words. We're offended by certain thoughts, certain behaviors. We're offended by worship. We're offended by this person. We're offended by that. We dwell on being offended quite often. But why are we, as Christians, always so propensity to have this offended nature? Our culture seems to always be offended. You have to worry about what you say to everybody because they may get offended as well. This idea of being offended is odd. And I don't think we're really doing a good job in our culture by being so easily offended. I had a friend, he was fired from preaching one time because there was a lady in the congregation that was offended because he used the term pregnant from the pulpit. So maybe next week I will not be back, but he was essentially dismissed for using that term because there was somebody who was offended by that word. Now, being offended is really opposed to God. In the parable of the prodigal son, you have the father, and the father character is representing God. And the behavior of the father represents the behavior of God himself in that account. And what is so powerful about the behavior of the dad is that he is not easily offended. You have the older son who is self-righteous. You have the younger son who goes into the far country and spends all his wealth. And both times they insult the dad. They insult the father. But instead of the father becoming all offended and upset, he goes to both of them and tries to work it out. He goes and offers them grace and love and acceptance. Instead of him thinking about how this affects him and what they did to him, he goes and says, hey, this is not about me. This is not my ego trip. This is about me trying to connect with you. Let's look at our text this morning in Luke chapter 15, verse 22 to 24 and 30 to 32. But the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. But when this son of yours came, who had devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. He said to him, son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad. For this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost, and he is found. The father here is not worried about him being offended. It's interesting that the father doesn't concern himself with how these sons behave. They are very rude, disrespectful to him, but he doesn't become easily offended. I think we can learn some valuable lessons from this dad. And the first lesson I want to highlight is this: be quick to forgive. Be quick to forgive. Look at Luke chapter 15, verse 22. But the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. Now, here's the son, and he is in the driveway, and the father sees him afar off, and he takes off, and he starts to run to his son. And the son starts to give this speech. Dad, you know, and the father cuts him off. He doesn't go there at all. Now this is amazing because he's not going there to lecture his boy. You would almost think that a lot of parents would run there and all of a sudden they would be like, son, you have done this. I heard you did that. How dare you? You embarrassed me in front of all the community, all of the family, all my friends, all the people I respect. Look at me and they laugh at me because of your behavior. You have offended me with what you have done. And the father could go there. The father could go there and be right. But the father doesn't care. He's only concerned with having his son back. He is quick to forgive. I don't know about you, but there's something beautiful about people that you're in relationship with. That when you have messed up, and we have all messed up, we have all made mistakes. But when you have somebody who is very quick to forgive, hey, we don't need to go down this conversation anymore. We're done with it. They come to you because they have messed up. And instead of you lecturing them, you say, hey, it's done. It's forgiven. Let's move on. Let's not make this separate us in our relationship. Now, one of the ways that I test relationships is this way. If you feel comfortable bragging to me. Now, I know you must think we must be really in a good relationship because I brag to you all the time. So you must really feel that Matthew feels comfortable with you. Well, I feel comfortable if you brag to me. Because there's something about bragging to one another that you should not do, but you can only do it to people you feel very much in relationship with. Because if you brag to the wrong person, they get really mad. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, who does that person think they are? I can't believe they're always bragging. But if you love somebody and they brag to you, you want to hear it because you want to rejoice with them. You're excited for them. But you all know, because good people skills is this: don't ever brag. But if you go to somebody and you're willing to brag to me, you know what I feel like? I feel like you are confident enough in our relationship where you don't have to worry about what I think about you. You know that I love you and I trust you and I think the world of you, and you can just sit there and brag on. At least you all know I do that, so... The second thing I want to talk about that can help us be like this dad is the door is always open. Look at Luke chapter 15, 23 to 24. And bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Now I don't know where I got this term, the door is always open. Maybe it's some southern idea that I picked up. But it's the idea of that you are always welcomed in the home. You are always welcomed back. That the door is always open. Come anytime you want because the door is open for you. Now think about this younger son. The younger son is in the far country and he knows what he has done. But somehow the father has developed enough of a relationship with his boy. And the son knows the character of the dad, that he believes that if he comes home, the dad will at least allow him to be in the farmhouse. He believes that he will be accepted back. He may not be accepted back at full status, though that's what the father gives him. But he knows that if he comes back, the father will accept him back. There is something about the reputation of this dad that he has the attitude that the door is always open for his boy. That he can come back any time he wants. You know, when we're easily offended, you know what we end up doing? We cause everybody around us to walk on eggshells. Now, you may not think you do that, but if you ask your loved one, are you easily angered? Do you always find a problem in every scenario? That you always get more upset than you ought to be? That the person has to really watch what they're doing around you because you may be offended by what they do? Do you feel like you are in relationship with somebody that you have to really watch yourself because you're concerned that they're going to be offended and then they're going to have emotional distance? That's what happens. When you are easily offended, You create distance in your relationships. You break bonds because people don't feel comfortable with who you are. And so if you are always easily given to anger, you're not really creating this open door policy. When you think about the Bible, this is a biblical theme. Adam and Eve banished from the garden. Cain had to wander into the wilderness. David lived in exile for a while. The Israelites in Egypt were slaves, and God called them back into the promised land. There's this idea that you always have people who fly away from home, flee home. But God is doing everything He can to bring us back into community. And you want to be of such a person that people feel comfortable with you in that community. This is what I try to do as parenting. I want to parent in such a way that when my kids don't have to come home, they want to come home. Now, there's a big deal with this. Now, think about it for a second. Now, if I am always beating up on my kids, I'm always on their case, and all I do is highlight all of their mistakes, there will come a time in their lives where they do not have to come home. Now, they're not going to call me up and say, you know, Dad, I just don't want to come home. I just don't like you. Because that's not what kids do. This is what kids do. Hey, you want to come home? Why don't you come for Christmas? Well, you know, I've been just so busy at work. Oh, we just so swamped here. We just have so many things going on. I'd love to come home, but I just can't. And your kids will make up reasons and excuses so they don't have to come home. And so if you parent in such a way that your kids feel that acceptance, feel that love, that they're going to want to be in your presence. Because when you're so easily offended, nobody wants to be around you. They're scared to be around you. And the last thing they're ever going to do is be their true selves. The next attitude that we can learn from this father is this: be generous with grace. Look at Luke chapter 15, verse 30 to 32. But when this son of yours came, who had devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. And he said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad. For this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. The father's generous with grace here. He could have sat back and said, Son, you're going to have to pay me back everything you have spent, all the inheritance that you have wasted. But he doesn't. But that's easy sometimes for us. We can forgive the person who humbles themselves and says, hey, I'm a sinner. But in this case, this is the self-righteous older brother. Now, you know how it feels to be judged? You know, that person who's always judging you. And you know what the Bible says, judge not lest you be judged? You know how true that is? Because as soon as somebody judges me, you know what I do? Oh, I'm just looking. I am looking for an opportunity. And I may not come right up to you and say it to your face, but I'm watching and I'm thinking and say, oh, I remember when you got on my case about that. Oh, I am watching you now. And as soon as I see them mess up, it's like, yep. Oh, you judge me, but what about you? But if we want to be truly generous with grace, we need to be generous with grace for the sinner and the self-righteous. Because there's some people who are so self-righteous that you're just looking for them to mess up. But this father, he's not easily offended. He goes to his older son who won't come to the party, who won't come to the house. All of his friends know about this rude behavior of the boy. And he goes to him and he says, Son, why are you doing this? And the son's like, yeah, but you wasted all this money and you killed this fat cow and I've been the good son this whole time and you never celebrated at all. And the dad's like, that's all right. I understand. Son, I have always loved you. All that is mine is yours. He could have got upset with this son. You know, if this was the 1950s, he would have backhanded him. But he doesn't. He says, son, just come back home. Just come back in. I'm not offended. I think this is the key about God. God's big enough to handle bad behavior. And as Christians, if we're so easily offended by everybody around us that nobody measures up to our standards, all we're doing is cutting off relationships around us. If we respond in anger or self-righteousness, well, I can't believe you would do that. People are just saying, hey, I'm not going to be around you. I don't want to be around people that I feel like they will never accept me for who I am. So I want to give you a quick little test. And this is a really quick test, and you all can know where you are on this. And so this will be a test, and you will all realize the truth. How's your driving? How is your driving? So when someone cuts you off, do you show quick forgiveness? Are you apt to give grace, or are you like, I can't believe that person? Or are you, when someone is driving slow as could be, and it's that little 2-lane highway, and you're just wanting to pass, and you're like, what are they taking so long to? And you are so mad and frustrated and offended that they are not going 10 miles over the speed limit so you could go that fast. Or how about this? This is one of my pet peeves. And I do it all the time, but I hate it when somebody else does it. You know how we had that intersection up there by King Soopers? And you would be going, and you could get in one lane and go a lot farther because everybody else got over. And I would go up as farthest as I could. And then I would try to get over. Now, when I actually didn't do that and stayed in the regular lane and they went up high, I'm like, you're not getting in where I'm at. You can wait like everybody else. Are we easily offended? And I think sometimes we are. And when we're easily offended, we're breaking relationships. And this dad is so big, his ego's not attached to himself. He has no ego here. God doesn't have an ego. Because a lot of times when we're offended, it just means that our egos are hurt. And when our egos get hurt, we act foolish. But this Father, God, has no ego issues. There's times that He is offended, but He's not easily offended by poor behavior. We need to be like this Father and not be easily offended as well. You know, God came to earth, and we're going to offer the invitation, but I want this invitation to be a time of self-reflection. And so we're going to partake of the Lord's Supper after the sermon, and I want you to reflect on this. God was willing to send His Son, and you want to talk about being offended, spit, beat, whipped, but God still did it for us. I want you to think about your attitude this week and apply it to yourself and think, hey, the next time somebody does something that I don't like, I tell you what, I'm going to be quick to forgive. I'm going to always have that door open, and I'm going to be generous with grace. And so I believe we're going to stand. So why don't we stand and we're going to sing.